This is the key to section 7.7.b, part B. So we're going to simplify complex fractions again. So just as the previous worksheet, you're going to look at all the denominators. Now remember, these are complex fractions. That means that there's at least one fraction in the numerator of this complex fraction and at least one fraction in the denominator of this complex fraction. So in the numerator, there are two fractions here. So we can think of this x as x over 1, and we have this, and 1 over x. And so we have this fraction as well. So if you look at all these three denominators, 1, 2, 3, the LCD is, the LCD of 1, x, and 2 is 2x. So the LCD for the first one is 2x. Now, just as a previous one, you want to clear these denominators. So you want to, when you at some point you want to divide these denominators out with the LCD to get ones in their place, factors of ones in their place. Okay, so notice that there are two fractions here in this numerator part of this complex fraction. So we're going to put that in parentheses, and I'm going to multiply it by the LCD. But what I do to the numerator, I do to the denominator. Now I'm not going to put that in parentheses here because that's just one fraction. And now we're going to reduce. Divide out common factor. Well, actually here, let's do this first. Let's go ahead and distribute the 2x. So I'm going to get x over 1 times 2x minus 1 over x times 2x. So each of these fractions is multiplied by the LCD. Divided by, now over here, I'm just going to go ahead and divide out these 2's. Now you are left with x plus 1 times x. So that means this, x plus 1 in parentheses times x. Alright, and then now you're going to distribute the x through the parentheses. Okay, now over here, I'm going to get x times 2x is 2x squared. Now I can reduce these x's here, and in their places I'm left with factors of 1, and so I get 2x squared minus 1. Minus 2. 2x squared minus 2. Divided by, and I'm going to go ahead right here, since this is already in factored form, I'm going to leave it as factored form. So there's going to be x times x plus 1. Now in the numerator, and you're going to see why I'm going to do this, in the numerator I'm going to factor out a 2, so I get 2 times x squared minus 1 divided by x times x plus 1. And then notice, remember, you always need a factor as much as possible because there's a possibility that at least one factor up here would divide with at least one factor in the denominator. So if I factor this part here, because that's the difference of two squares, I get 2 times x minus 1 times x plus 1 divided by the denominator, which remember we kept it factored, so that's x times x plus 1. And notice that I can divide out these factors of x plus 1, and so I'm left with the answer of 2 times x minus 1 divided by x. So that's your answer. Okay, now in the second one, I have 6 over 1 y squared, and 36 over 1. So the LCD here is going to be y squared. Now, I also noticed that there are two fractions in the numerator part and then two fractions in the denominator part. So I'm going to put those both in parentheses, and I'm going to multiply by the LCD y squared. And now I'm going to distribute the y squared, and I get 6y squared minus x over y times y squared divided by x squared divided by y squared. And again, I'm going to distribute this y squared times y squared minus 36y squared. So that's where I'm at. Now I'm going to go ahead and simplify as much as possible. So this part here stays 6y squared. And over here, this y will reduce into y squared, and I'm left with a factor of y. So I get 6y squared minus xy divided by, over here, this y will divide out with one of these. So I'm left with x squared y. So x squared y minus 36 y squared. Okay, now let's factor as much as we can. So if you look at the numerator, I can factor out a y. So I get y times 6y minus x divided by, over here I can factor out a y also. So I get y. This was a y as well. Alright, so I get y times x squared minus 36y. Alright, make sure I did this correctly. I'm sorry, right here, I kind of messed this up. Right here, that was a y squared. I put this as y. So this y squared will divide it with this y squared, and you're just left with x squared right here. And then over here, okay, this part's right. So that's going to change this right here, because this right here is now the difference of two squares. So I'm going to get x minus 6y times x plus 6y. So again, you got to be careful. See how I messed this part up by just putting y when this should have been y squared. Okay, now notice that this 6y minus x and this x minus 6y, those two are opposites. So that means that when I reduce this, I'm going to write this as a factor of 1, and I'm going to write this as a factor of negative 1. And so now I'm going to get y times negative 1 is negative y divided by, and let's see, the only thing I'm left with is x plus 6y. Okay, so that's the answer for number 2. Okay, number 3, I have a squared a, b squared b. So the LCD here is going to be a squared b squared. And so I have two fractions in the numerator part, two fractions in the denominator part. So I'm going to close both of those in parentheses. And I'm going to multiply by the LCD a squared b squared. I'll multiply both parts by the LCD. And I'm going to distribute. So I get b over a squared, b divided by a squared, times the LCD, plus 1 over a times the LCD, divided by, and distributing here, I get a divided by a squared times the LCD, plus 1 over b times the LCD. Alright, so that's where I'm at. Alright, now let's go ahead and reduce factors. So the two factors of a were reduced with the two factors of a here. You're left with factors of 1. b times b squared is b cubed. Alright, plus this factor of a will reduce with one of these, so you're left with one factor of a. And so I get 1 times a times b squared is ab squared, divided by these two factors of a reduced with these two factors of a, you're left with factors of 1, so you get ab squared, plus this factor of b reduces one of these, so you're left with 1, so I get a, and don't forget you're left with factors of 1 right here, so I get a squared b, so plus a squared b. And now if I factor as much as I can in the numerator, I can factor out a b, so I get b times b squared plus a, actually I can factor out a b squared. So I can factor out b squared, so I get b squared times b plus a, b plus a. In the denominator, I can factor out an ab, and I get b plus a. That's what I get. Now always check yourself. ab times b is ab squared. ab times a is a squared b. Alright, now what happens is, first of all, these factors here divide out, and this, I have two factors to be in the numerator, only one in the denominator, so I can reduce those, so I'll be left with one factor of 1 here, and I'm left with a 1b factor here. So the answer, it looks like, is going to be b divided by a. So b divided by a. All right, number 4. So number 4, again, you have a complex fraction. The numerator, you're going to think of this as 1 over 1, 1 over 1, and the LCD of 1x, 1 and x squared is x squared. That's your LCD, x squared. So again, you're going to multiply both the numerator part and the denominator part by x squared. So remember, you want to get rid of these denominators, so you're going to clear the denominators. And now distributing the x squared, I get, and both numerator and denominator, I get 1 times x squared is x squared plus 4 over x times x squared. So each fraction is being multiplied by the LCD divided by this fraction, which is 1, minus 16 over x squared. That fraction times x squared. So 1 times x squared here is x squared. So 1 times x squared is x squared, minus 16 over x squared times x squared. Alright, so now here I can reduce. So remember, the whole idea is to clear those fractions. So this factor of x reduces one of these. These two factors of x reduces with two of these. And you're left with factors of 1s in their place. And so I get x squared plus 4x divided by x squared minus 16. Alright, now the next step is to factor numerator and denominator. In the numerator, I can factor out an x, so I get x times x plus 4. In the denominator, that's the difference of two squares, so I get x minus 4 times x plus 4. Alright, and then notice now I can divide out these common factors. You're left with factors of 1 in their place. And so the answer is x divided by x minus 4. Alright, so that was number 4. Alright, number 5. Again, you have these two fractions here and these two fractions here. This is 3a, 3b, b, and a. So the LCD will be 3ab. Now again, as before, I have I have two fractions here. Some of you put and close that in parentheses. I have two fractions here. I'm going to close that in parentheses, and I'm going to multiply the numerator part and the denominator part by the LCD. And now I'm going to distribute. So I get 1 over 3a times the LCD minus 1 over 3b times the LCD divided by a over b, this fraction, a over b, times the LCD minus this fraction, b over a, times the LCD. Alright, so every fraction you saw was being multiplied by the LCD. So all these 4 fractions is being multiplied by the LCD. Now let's reduce. The whole purpose of multiplying by the LCD is to clear these denominators. So in other words, you're going to end up with 1s in their places. All of these will be 1s in their places. That's the idea. So 3a will divide into this 3a. All right. This 3b will reduce it into this 3b. And you're left with the factor of a here. And you're left with the factor of b here. This b reduces into this b. And then this a divides out into this a. And now what's left is this. All you're left with in this part here is b minus. All you're left with in this part is a divided by a times 3a is 3a squared minus b times 3b is 3b squared. And here in the numerator I can't factor this, but in the denominator I can factor out a 3, and when I do that, notice what happens. When I factor out a 3, I'm left with 3 times a squared minus b squared, and that's the difference of two squares. So I end up with the numerator being b minus a. The denominator then would be, make sure you extend this, will be 3 times a minus b times a plus b. And then notice that these two factors here, b minus a and a minus b, are opposites. So in their places, this is going to be a factor of 1. And this will be a factor of negative 1. And so the answer becomes, in the numerator, that's negative 1. In the denominator, that's 3 times a plus b, and leave it in factored form. And there's your answer. Okay, number 6, you have this denominator here and this denominator here. So the LCD then would be, looks like b squared c squared. So b squared c squared. And so what you're going to do is you're going to multiply the numerator part, and there's only one fraction here, times the LCD. And you're going to multiply the denominator part by the LCD as well. And now I'm going to reduce. Okay, so when I reduce, notice that this b here reduces with one of these. Don't forget you get a factor of 1 here. These two factors of c reduces into these two factors of c. And so when you look at the numerator part, 2a times b is 2ab. Okay, now that's being divided by, all right, over here, these two factors of b reduces into this one. This factor of c reduces into one of these. And so now you're going to get 4a squared c. 4a squared c. And now I can reduce further. This 2 divides, 2 and 4 here are divisible by 2. So 2 into 2 is 1. 2 into 4 is 2. Let's see, let me make sure I didn't make an error here. Alright, so this will be one factor of, this factor of a reduces into one of these, and you have b over c left, so you can't do anything there. So you're going to get b divided by 2ac. So that's your answer there. So b divided by 2ac. Okay, now in this one here, the last one, you have the LCD being 2x squared, it looks like. So LCD here will be 2x squared. And so since I have at least two fractions here, I'm going to close that in parentheses, and I'm going to multiply the numerator part by 2x squared, and multiply the denominator part by 2x squared. And then I'm going to distribute. And so when I distribute, I'm going to get 1 over 2, that fraction, times the LCD, minus 2 over x times the LCD, all over 1 over x times the LCD, minus 4 over x squared times the LCD. Alright, let's reduce. This factor of 2 into this factor of 2, you left with factors of 1. When I reduce the x's, this will be a factor of 1, and here you're just left with one factor of x. Over here, reduce this factor of x with one of these. And then over here, both factors of x reduces with both factors of x here. And it looks like I'm left with x squared minus, looks like 4x divided by, and this is going to be 2x minus, and this was going to be 8, it looks like. And then factor in the numerator and the denominator. In the numerator, I can factor out an x, so I get x times x minus 4. And the denominator, I can factor out a 2. So I'm left with 2 times x minus 4. And then notice what happens is that these factors of x minus 4's divide out. And don't forget, you're left with factors of 1 in their place. Kind of makes sense because x minus 4 divided by x minus 4 is 1. And you're left with x divided by 2. And so there's your answer for number 7, x divided by 2. Okay, so that's going to take care of the key to section 7.7, part